But my name is Marie Giangrande. I'm the lead for financial services for Outsystems, and I'm here today with Nick Mates. Nick Mates is from Lendr, one of our premier clients. And Lendr has, chosen Outsystems as their core development and delivery platform for digital lending services. And that will, I think, give us, a real deep dive into a customer's journey, how they got to low code, what low code, how it impacts their business. And, he has actually built his entire digital services lending platform on Outsystems. So we're very proud to have Nick with us today. And what we'll do in today's agenda, just in the next, 15 minutes, let me get to the next slide, is, we're going to look at how these full stack low code platforms, really impact the business and the technology productivity. We'll look at just quickly drivers to adopt low code, how low code can extend the gains of agile, and then we'll dive right to Lendr and listen to Nick talk about his customer journey in building an integrated digital lending platform. Now, because Outsystems may be a new name to many of you, and I'm sure next to AWS, we just don't have the name recognition. So I would appreciate everyone in the audience if you would just indulge me 2 minutes so I can give you an intro to Outsystems. Outsystems is considered a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for low-code development platforms. And, this is basically has kind of, I think, tilted us to the introduction into many financial firms around the globe. And I see the more I engage with Outsystems, I'm seeing not just a few customers, but I'm actually seeing hundreds of customers start to use our platform for a full end-to-end digital services delivery. In fact, we do have a range of customers. We have everything from banks to investment firms to consumer finance firms to fintechs to service providers. We have some of the most innovative consumer finance companies like Lendr, who we're going to hear from in a minute. And, all of these firms, whether it's the largest, like KeyBank is the 25th largest in the US, or HDFC for service delivery, they are the largest lender in the world. We really have found acceptance across all types of IT organizations. And where these organizations start, I've aligned in this slide, I've aligned the logos with where they started with low code. A lot of them starting, especially the big ones, starting with risk and compliance. But we also have a lot of work, a lot of projects that have been done specifically in client acquisition and service delivery. So not only, I think, the testimony from our clients really has kept us now for the 6th year in a row as a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, but it's our global footprint. We operate today, we have about 2,000 employees. We have about 700,000 community members across 87 different countries and 400 different partners. All right, so what are the drivers? So thank you for that indulgence. I really appreciate it. What are the drivers for low-code platforms? Well, it's undeniable. We're all competing in this tech-first world. The influx of tech players has really, highlighted a lot of the antiquated processes that we have. But what it really has done is reset customer expectations. But this is wonderful because it's spurring innovation and growth. 80% of Americans say it's important to connect their bank data into their digital apps. Embedded banking is estimated to be generating revenues of over 400 billion just in lending and credit. And look at payments. This year the expectation is $4.4 billion will be spent with the digital wallet. And that's probably another conversation for another time, because I think there's a lot of interesting monetization projects going on with the payments area. So how do you pursue this innovation with a packaged licensed product that all your competition use? You can't. You got to build your advantage in this environment. And if we look at this slide, this is from McKinsey, and I wanted to bring it forward because it's very dramatic, it's very accurate, and very insightful. They looked at the typical retail bank, but this is widely applicable. And they're basically looking at, if we look at the center there, they're saying that the typical operating profile of a company needs to change from being very operations heavy into being developer heavy. So their chart here shows that whereas today most IT departments have about 24% of their developers, 24% of their staff as developers, it's expected by 2030 that 45 or up to 50% should be development staff. If you are competing in a tech-first world, this is the kind of operating profile that's needed in order to have that innovation. So what does it mean? On the left here, we've got the bullet points. McKinsey is saying 80% of operations can be automated. They're saying that 45% of your technology staff should be developers. And only in this way can you really become, kind of a tech-first, responsive and resilient, real-time operating enterprise. So, but successful firms, they can't just stop there, right? Because that's the target profile. That's how everyone operates. So you can't stop there. You gotta get the next step to a first mover advantage. And how you do that is, I love these terms. We're talking about leaning left and leaning right. And kind of in the agile methodology, the lean left is really understanding the business impacts, really understanding what kind of user interface is needed, what kind of logic flows are important for controls and compliance, what kind of exception processing is needed. But then on the whole other side, leaning right, when you're doing real-time digital services delivery, you need, APIs, you go ahead and need flexible configurations across a multitude of infrastructures. And, in many ways, I think the best way to think about low-code platforms is that they are actually a very important piece of the puzzle of how to lean all the way left and lean all the way right. And that's because of what's built into the platform. It's a visual module interface so that it's very easy to show non-technology staff the logic, the flow. You can have people manage parts of the components as they are being developed, and really help to bring the organization together and help to stretch, right? Both leaning left and leaning right, to the business and to technology. So low-code platforms actually have become the opportunity to address the major pillars of our challenges today, which is developer productivity, talent shortage, and simplified DevOps and SecOps. And in fact, low code changes the whole economics of building. So building new applications, I should say, excuse me. So how does low code change the economics? Well, this just is a small example from KeyBank, one of their early projects, the Community Reinvestment Act. So when they had scoped out this project with traditional coding, the estimate came back that it would be a year to get to market. Take a year. With Outsystems, they were able to get to a final design in 3 weeks, and they were able to get to market and fully deployed in 6 weeks, right? So that's the game changer. 5 to 7 times advantage. And that's where the financial firms who understand arbitrage opportunities really are getting on the bandwagon with Outsystems. So how does low code fit in a technology portfolio? The best person and the role model, I think, of leaning left and leaning right is Nick Mates. And Nick Mates joins us. He is the VP of Operations and Technology from Lendr. He began his career working in risk management using a data-centric approach, and he's now been promoted and now oversees Lendr's technology, including the loss prevention teams. And again, he's a role model because he has fostered a new culture at Lendr of collaboration between the business and technology. And he actually has substantially impacted in a very positive way the business. And Nick is here today to take us through his journey. Welcome, Nick.
Wow, thank you, Marie. Wish I had recorded that one. Gotta say, also, Ron, you were piquing my ears every single time because I am Nicholas only to my mother when I was troublesome in my youth. So appreciate the great introductions and level setting here for kind of our success here we've had at Lendr. So basically today, I'm going to be going over our journey with low code and our journey as an organization as a whole over the past 4 or 5 years at this point. I joined Lendr in 2017, and as Marie mentioned, started on the business side and have come to take over leadership within our technological platform. And when I joined, we had some symptoms and diagnoses. Should always check the pronunciation when I pronounce those things, along with the growth that we experienced. And then I want to dive a little bit into the cures that we identified. And then most importantly, from the business side, how the cures that we implemented via low code elicited strong results, not only from business performance, but as well as technological performance. So a little bit about Lendr on the whole. We provide working capital and invoice factoring solutions for US-based SMBs. So our core customer persona is in the 1 to 50 employee mom and pop pizza shop that needs a pizza oven replaced, rather than going for those large scale production facilities and things. As part of that, our ethos is really about fast, flexible funding for the underbanked. Underbanked is oftentimes an overused term, but we often try and meet the customers where their needs are, providing the funding that they need to continue operating that business without the overhead of all the financial constraints that can overwhelm small businesses when it's just a 1 to 50 person shop. We've seen success in that ethos with our placement on the Inc. 5000 in 2018 and 2019. Part of that growth is what we're going to be talking about today and some of the problems that arose from that. So you can imagine SMBs, we fell off of that in 2020 for some obvious reasons. But with that growth, we really did a state of the architecture, not only within our technological organization, but within our business organization as well, and determined that there were 4 main breakpoints within our infrastructure at that time, where we had some unaddressed external needs with our customers, with our broker channels, with our syndication partners, that led to less than optimal user experiences and friction between internal and external users. A part of that friction for internal users as well was disparate and duplicative systems, where that growth forced us to build out systems that were disjointed and fragile, which we'll dive into a little bit further. And what I've touched on a little bit already is those high-touch internal processes, where because of those disparate and duplicative systems, a user had to go to 3 or 4 different platforms just to be enabled to do the value-add work that we were asking them to do. And all of these systems manifested as low development throughput that just created quite a bit of friction between our internal teams and demands from the business, as well as the ability to deliver from the technology team. So stealing a little bit of the terminology from Marie, we had these symptoms when leaning left towards the business. How do we identify those main friction points and the specific friction points that we were seeing because of our growth, where we were seeing stagnant growth in our broker funnel? A large percentage of our submissions were coming through that funnel. The high volume of requests that led to manual interventions that kept our sales team from being able to move on to the next operation instead of having self-service options for our customers. That is just table stakes today in today's technological environment. Both of these operational inefficiencies led to low conversion rates. So that top line growth was hampered, even though we had success on the growth funnel. There could have been greater growth in that regard. And then all of this coalesces into a term that we're all familiar with and lose sleep at night, where it's that shadow IT, where all of a sudden, because business users aren't getting the needs met of the day-to-day operational capacity of the technology, they go off and build their own homegrown solutions that, both from a governance perspective as well as a long-term efficiency perspective, just don't provide the best value to the customer as far as how we interact with them from day to day. And then think I'm using Coalesce quite a bit here. But then all of a sudden you have these circuitous interactions between departments, where rather than having specific ownership of a customer throughout our funnel, you would have that customer passed back and forth, not only adding friction, but adding confusion to the user experience. And this is manifested as part of the symptoms from the technology side. Now we're leaning over to the right. That's going to be hard with the mirrored video, but I hope you get the gist. So all of this really boils down to what was the failing of our technological infrastructure. We had those 4 systems of records where we had not only domain silos within technological expertise and ability to action upon change there, but also within our own data infrastructure. Something that Redis could have probably helped us with, where all of these flows all of a sudden became technology centric rather than user centric. So within the internal organization dynamics, we also had different domain vernaculars, whether a technology user was talking to another technology employee versus when a technology employee was talking to a business employee. And all of this complexity led to fragility that was leading to, we'll get to it later, but roughly a 50% bug fix rate. Rather than actually providing value to the business, the majority of our technological spend was purely keeping the lights on, which not only within the business, within the technology team as well, led to those same that same culture of workarounds that we were trying to mitigate within the shadow IT from the business side. So what was our treatment plan? What we really wanted to do is, since, as you've probably heard from this conversation, that many of these friction points were from the business side, let's unify their experience first. Let's unify that UI, provide them a single place of record, despite the fact that there may still be those systems of record in the back end that are disparate. From the user side, which is most experienced, the customer is always right. And within our customer definition at this point in time, our customer was our internal users that we weren't servicing well. So bringing all of that together in the UI first was paramount, and then also prioritizing those complex problems, where if we have a fragile decisioning engine and risk-based pricing model within our underwriting workflows, that provides a much greater risk to the business continuity on the whole than purely whether a document can be moved between Azure blobs. So we wanted to prioritize re-architecture and revamp of those more complex processes and just wrapping those simple processes in Outsystems infrastructure first. Although you may have picked up on it, I think I'll let you in on the secret that we did end up choosing Outsystems. So something I did touch on previously is we need to move the way the technology speaks about the business to be closer to how the business talks about the business. There's no reason to have 2 separate vernaculars within an organization that then just leads to the internal friction points of communication that just leads to lower efficiency on the whole. So what were our implementation options? I am actually going to speed up a little bit because I am being rather verbose today. We had these 3 implementation options. I may have touched on this already, but we would re-architect our existing infrastructure, where just expand our existing code base and our existing technology team infrastructure. We could move to a low-code solution that was more domain specific, where we're solving individual touch points within either between or within departments, or we could go full stack low-code. And we're here today because we chose option 3. Because we felt that Outsystems was able to provide that true full stack user experience. So what does that transformation look like? So we'll dive into the architecture a little bit more in a second, but today we have 14 different end user applications servicing many different customer journeys, whether that is a business entity or one of our broker partners. All of them interacting with Outsystems on the front end with varying components of whether that's a third-party integration also built in Outsystems, or to my point earlier, where it's purely just a document retrieval and update service that we just encapsulated within our Outsystems environment. So even though it's still C# running on the back end, it's encapsulated within Outsystems lessening that domain-specific technology expertise needed within our team. And as you can imagine, we have quite a few integrations about our decisioning engine. So we've been able to integrate with actually 20 different third parties, all within that unified UI experience to lessen that user friction between various platforms. Along with that 95% conversion rate. So we have completely moved, not completely, for the most part, moved away from all of our existing infrastructure that caused so many friction points to that unified experience, not only in the front end, but in the back end as well. And finally, I just went through our surveillance audit. We were able to get ISO 27001 certified using Outsystems platform on the whole. So the security considerations from our organization are not only mitigated by a lot of the automations within the Outsystems platform, but we can also provide those robust controls to our auditors through this process. So what does that success look like? This is basically a high-level visualization with some more logos on it on what it looks like to manage our technology stack from a vendor management perspective. We were able to coalesce all of these various vendors into a single unified platform where a developer, in the same way that a user only has to interact with this unified UI compared to 4 systems records, our developers also have a centralized place of truth as far as our development stack goes, which has led to 117% increase in deliverables per FTE on the technology team, from the leaning right to the technology side, and then leaning left. The high level result is that on a per underwriter FTE basis, we're seeing a 31% increase in funding efficiency and throughput, going back to our ethos of providing that fast, flexible funding. Diving into the architecture a little bit. This is where you can see visually what that user experience looks like. So each color here represents a different vendor that we were integrating with, or a user was experiencing throughout the platform, or throughout our Lendr platform. This disparate system led to all of those friction points. So in 2022, today, you can still see some green there. That's at 5% of the legacy code base that's only providing those transactional level processes. But you can see that each one of our individual user journeys now only interacts with a specific platform that serves their needs at their specific time. And then from the agile perspective, cool. Thanks, Mary. So really the Outsystems enhancement on the agile methodologies allowed us to achieve this with a relatively small team where we can develop from the UI all the way down to our database schema interactions in a much more expedited fashion that allows for us to deliver all of this value to the business in a much more true to agile form, where I don't believe we actually have these KPIs in place. But we are now on weekly deployment cycles versus monthly random cadence previously, where we can be closer to agile because no one is ever true agile, no one is ever true waterfall, but we can provide that value add to the business in a more seamless experience because Outsystems automates so many of those manual and tedious processes with the SDLC that allows agile to stretch its legs and provide value to the organization. So what are the results? In a little bit more detail. When we're leaning left towards the business, this first point here I've already touched on a little bit, but I wanted to expound a little bit on how it touched various departments throughout our entire organization. So from the underwriting throughput, we see that 31% increase. From the sales throughput, we see that 10% increase, where it's manifested through those fewer circuitous interactions between departments, where a single department could own a customer as they move through our funnel, because they don't have to live through so many systems of records. Apologies. And our broker onboarding time was basically cut 91%, where those low value add actions by our operational users can now, that time spent there can now be used to provide value to the next customer. rather than the data entry of just onboarding a new broker or making sure that an address is updated correctly in the system, which allows us to contact our leads at a 19% higher rate as well, where even though some roles are more intrinsically manual in the way that they interact with customers and understanding their specific business needs, it allows that sales user to understand that customer more when they're doing more value add versus just data entry. So from the technology side, we have, I'm sorry if you can go right now. So from the first point, again, touched on this just briefly, that our technology team is over 100% more efficient than they were before our Outsystems implementation. Along with that, because of that proliferation of vendors, we've been able to consolidate our vendor expenditures by 32% from a budgetary line item. And that break fix, we're now hovering from that 50%. We're now looking at about a 10% bug rate within the organization, and that's always a moving target within our technology team on the whole, meaning that the turnaround time from the time a user requests a new feature or reports a bug has gone from over 2 weeks to just a couple days. Our bug remediation rate within 2 days has gone from 0% to 80%. So we are able to not only provide value at a much higher clip, but also remediate any issues at a much higher clip than we were previously before Outsystems.